Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the April 20th, 2021 legislative session of the Wicomico County Council. This time I'd like to call the meeting to order, and if you'd like to join us with the Lord's Prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance, you can. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
Against us, and lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Ms. Hurley, would you please read the items of the consent agenda?
Good morning, Mr. President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. We have 6 items on the consent agenda this morning. We have the legislative minutes from April the 6th, 2021, open work session minutes from March the 2nd, 2021, pertaining to the proposed charter provisions for discussion with the Charter Review Committee. We have open work session minutes from March the 2nd, 2021, on the letter of support for House Bill 795 and Senate Bill 715. Open work session minutes from March the 2nd, 2021, on the letter of support for grant funding to renovate the Whitehaven Church. Open work session minutes from March the 2nd, 2021, pertaining to the letter of support for Senate Bill 620, which is an income tax subtraction modification for volunteer fire, rescue, or emergency medical services members. And open work session minutes from March the 16th, 2021, pertaining to the quarterly work session with the Board of Education.
All right, need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Ms. Hurley.
Before we begin, there's one housekeeping matter, and that is a change to today's agenda. The second closed work session on the proposed land acquisition will actually be held first, and then the sequence of the other closed session items will remain the same.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley.
So the first item on the agenda this morning is the submission of the fiscal year 22 operating capital budget. And before you, we have Mr. John Pessota, our acting county executive, and Mrs. Pam Olin, our director of finance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pessota. If you would, please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, everyone. John Pessota, Acting County Executive, and Pam Olin, the Finance Director.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Dear council members and public, I hereby submit the proposed operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2022. In accordance with the county charter, the proposed budget is balanced. The primary focus of this budget is to identify and fund Wicomico County's core service needs: public safety, public health, education, and infrastructure. Additionally, this budget was prepared with the recognition that all county stakeholders' finances have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. This proposed budget reflects no increase in either the real or personal property tax rates. In fact, upon application of the revenue cap requirements, the real property tax rate declined for FY22. However, utilizing the amount of revenue estimated, the budget effectively addresses the most urgent needs in the aforementioned categories, continues the mission of providing efficient and cost-effective operation of our county departments, and will require the reasonable use of our fund balance for needed capital projects. An increase in commercial tipping fees in the solid waste division is proposed in this budget in order to sustain its enterprise fund designation and to financially plan for near future new cell permitting and construction. A $2 increase from $65 to $67 a ton is recommended. Additionally, it is proposed that the yearly household sticker fee remain at $60 However, there'll be a $30 fee for additional sticker. These fees will remain the lowest in our region and aid in maintaining future costs. Wycomico County continues to experience growth in revenue. The FY22 estimated revenue is budgeted at $161 million, an increase of almost $8 million, or 5.15% over last year's budget. This includes $3.9 million of American Rescue Plan revenue and $4 million of general fund prior year revenue, or fund balance, for PAYGO Capital Improvement Plan funding. It should be noted that, among other factors, the revenue projections assume continued mitigation of the COVID-19 pandemic. If there is a reversal of this trend, revenue may be impacted. We will continue to closely monitor all of the county's revenue categories. In March of this year, the county received notice that it will be receiving $20 million in coronavirus physical recovery relief funds from the federal government American Rescue Plan Act. These funds will be split equally in 2 tranches 1 year apart. Additional clarifying guidance on acceptable utilization of these funds is expected from the United States Treasury Department by mid-May 2021. The plan's initial broad guidance was applied in determining the appropriation of the $4 million towards identified needs. The remaining balance will remain available for future utilization. The State of Maryland Department of Assessments and Taxation has calculated Wycomico County's 2021 net assessable real property base at $6.6 billion, or a 3.43% increase over last year. Each 1 cent change in the real property tax rate equals approximately $665,000 in real property tax revenue. The FY22 real property tax rate will be reduced approximately 1 cent to 91 cents per $100 of assessed value, for a projected revenue of $61,483,000. Local income tax projected revenue is $56,400,000 and is based on the analysis of our most recent audited annual receipts and our current trends. At this time, I would like to present the following broad overview of the proposed budget. As soon as I take a sip of water.
Okay.
As we enter fiscal year 2022, we're facing much more uncertainty than we have in the past decade. We're just beginning to quantify the known impacts of COVID-19 and cannot predict future impacts, as we as a nation, state, and county do not yet have the pandemic fully controlled. The months of April, May, and June of 2020 had negative rates of inflation as the nation's economy basically shut down due to the pandemic. This resulted in a CPI-U calculation rate of 1.4%. Applying the county's revenue cap requirement of utilizing the lower of 2% or the CPI-U, the county could only grow its real property tax rate by 1.4%. In regards to local income tax, disbursements run approximately 12 to 14 months behind actual earnings, thereby creating a degree of uncertainty. However, based on state budgetary information, projections, and trends, we have applied a conservative, realistic revenue estimate. On the budget expense requests, the circuit court expenses reflect an example of an ancillary cost of COVID-19 and its impact, as the courts have been required to comply with COVID mitigating spacing requirements and other COVID-19 mitigating requirements, resulting in the need to lease a larger space to safely accommodate jury selection process. For the police, the need for additional body cameras are in part a result of the Police Accountability Act of 2021. Regarding the FOP proposed contract, the county has concluded its charter-required negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police. The first year of a 3-year agreement starting in FY22 includes salary and benefit increases of $1.1 million. The majority of the increased expenses in the Corrections Department are a result of COVID-19 and other factors. Basically, the needs of the inmate population have increased significantly. Mental health issues, addiction, and an increasingly unhealthy population, coupled with COVID-19 mitigating requirements and increased home detention expenses, have placed significant financial and other stressors on a public safety system that is now housing the most serious of offenders. In the Elections Department, state-set salary increases, electronic poll book replacements, redistricting costs, and increased training expenses have resulted in increased expenses. Regarding the county's maintenance of effort for the Board of Education, recently passed House Bill 1372 did lower the county's maintenance of effort to $1.2 million. However, uncertainty remains in future MOE calculations, and the impending financial impact of Kerwin is uncertain. As for the capital lease program, in order to achieve the program's intended results of a cost-efficient and safe, reliable vehicle fleet system, it is important that this dedicated funding continue to be fully appropriated. Beaver Run School replacement funding will be completed in FY22's budgeted year. Mardella High Middle School Renovation Addition Project is budgeted for $10 million. This is for the initial phase of planning and architectural design of this project. Solid waste cell construction, half of the $7 million project is budgeted to be bonded, with the other half coming from the solid waste reserve account. Regarding the West Side Intermediate Roof Replacement Project, it is important to note that the state no longer funds this type of systemic renovation. The next slide for the reflects a pie chart that shows the FY20 audited revenue by category. The takeaway here is that the 37 and 45 is 82% of general fund revenue. And compared to the next slide, which shows the 22 proposed general fund revenue by category, shows a 79% revenue source of being your local income tax and local property taxes. The bar graph for the expenses overall, comparing FY20 audited and FY22. As you look at this slide, the one takeaway is that public safety, health and human services, education, and related debt service average approximately 75% of the total general fund spending for both compared years. This is spending that reflects a commitment to the core services that the citizens of this county expect and deserve. This slide reflects the tax revenue and shows continual growth year after year in both the county's largest revenue sources, again, local property tax and local income taxes. It also demonstrates that the most significant growth in revenue has been in local income tax and highlights the importance of continued support for the local economy and the development thereof. This slide reflects the revenue cap. I'd ask you that you look to the right side, showing FY22. And it shows the lowering of the property tax rate based on the constant yield rate as calculated, again, by the State of Maryland Department of Assessment and Taxation. Again, also noting that revenue growth is restricted to 1.4%. The proposed real property tax rate has been lowered approximately 1 cent. Next slide for the Board of Education contribution. This clearly shows the continued commitment to the Board of Education in state mandated funding requirements as debt associated with borrowing for Board of Education projects. Future challenges. The Kirwan Commission, Maryland Education Reform passed by the state, and we're waiting for guidance on the first year of implementation. We have continued financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're also completing a comprehensive salary survey for all positions within the county during FY22 and determining how to implement the recommendations for the future. Management of increasing technological advancements is associated with efficient and economically feasible planning and implementation of broadband technology. Water sewer study assessment and planning relates to the implementation of the most feasible plan for delivering water and/or sewer to those areas with failing septic systems and to our designated growth areas. Recent Maryland legislative action regarding policing, particularly its anticipated significant expense on the general fund, including its effect on recruitment and retention. As we continue to monitor the economy, particularly in regard to inflation, future budgetary efforts to provide the citizens the services they deserve and expect are going to be challenging in managing the likely inflationary impacts with only a 2% maximum annual growth in property tax revenue allowed. To emphasize this point, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported in March of 2021 the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, that'd be the CPIU, increased 6%. This was the largest one-month increase since a 6% increase in August of 2012. In closing, I would like to recognize all of the contributors in this budget process for their hard work in evaluating their needs and adjusting to the changes in the business environment caused by the global pandemic. Additionally, I would like to thank the citizens who offered their feedback during the public hearing held March the 22nd and throughout this process. And we look forward to working with you during the budgetary process. Thank you very much.
All right. With that said, we just now received the executive budget. Do we have any comments or questions from the council?
Mr. Pacetto, I'll just thank you for the presentation, and this kind of starts the process for the council, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I would only
Mr.
add,
Kim.
thank you, Mr. Pacetto. The only thing I would add, and of course, the council hasn't had time to clearly review any of this, so this is just very preliminary, but in the comments referencing the capital lease programs, I was hoping that at some point in time we were going to evaluate whether the leasing program was more beneficial than purchasing outright, just as a reminder.
I believe you have a work session with
Mr. Rice, we do.
Mr. Rice today, I think. So we did fund this, I will say, in Rec and Parks. For example, the sale of some of the current vehicles is actually offsetting any increase that they have in their leasing costs for this coming fiscal years. So selling, keeping the fleet new is reducing our maintenance expense, and it's also allowing us to make sure we have a reliable fleet. But I believe, as I said, Mr. Rice is with you this afternoon.
Yes.
Do you mind real quick if I can walk you through the tabs so you know what you have here?
Please do.
The The first tab is this actual presentation that was just presented. The next tab is actually what will be referred to as the budget, and that's what will be attached to legislation. After that, I gave you guys additional documentation for your information purposes, but it wouldn't be attached to the legislation. It gives you the munis detail as to how some of this rolls up. It's got the general fund. No, that's just a tab to tell you what the rest behind it is. I'm sorry, that's how my brain thinks. So you got a tab that says everything after this is pretty much munis. So the next tab after that is then the general fund revenues out of munis, general fund expenditures out of munis, and then all the other funds that are budgeted, like solid waste, rec parks and tourism, civic center, Narcotics Task Force, LMB. I'm trying to think. There's one more that I'm missing. Airport. I might be missing one, but it has all the detail associated with munis for each one of those. And then the last thing is the position control listing. So most of the time when I'm going to be referring to budget, if I'm talking to you, it's kind of that document that's on the second tab, but we'll have the detail available to us if you have further questions.
Mr. Holloway?
Is there anywhere in this budget defined where any of the COVID funds that the county receives is benefiting each department, or how much of a total do we have?
So in the again, what I refer to as the budget, there's a tab that specifies how much we're utilizing that $3.9 million number and how it's broken down and how it meets the 4 priorities that the government has given us. Again, that number is not the full amount of the first tranche. In discussions with Ashley from PKS, basically, when we get that money in, we will basically put that on our balance sheet, and until it's appropriated, until we know how to spend it, it won't be classified as revenue. So it'll be sitting there available for us, the difference between what we get from the first tranche and what we've put in. Sorry, this keeps going in and out. What we put in as the request for 22.
Thank you.
Is there any way to get that in a document showing what we have available?
Yeah, I can create an additional document. I only put in here, and I think it's Schedule F. Give me 1 second. Actually, Exhibit E in the budget tab is the listing of what we're spending. I can send Laura an email that shows the difference between the 10 million and that, and what will be available to us if we find other uses for it.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? Ms. Olin, is it just me? This book looks much smaller than previous years.
The format of this has gone back to the design of the fiscal 19 and prior version of what will be attached. And so that is, again, that's why that section is smaller. You are given the munis detail to show all the detail, but again, the format of the actual budget and what will be attached is that section.
Okay. Mr. Hastings?
I was going to make the same note, though it does look smaller than previous years, it actually has a lot more detail. I'm actually happy to see the level of detail inside the munis piece. I mean, everything from exactly where the vehicles will be driving to what legislative committee meeting to, Zoom cost, et cetera. Like, it's actually, sections within here are much more detailed than I have seen in the past, which has always been a complaint, I think, from other people. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hastings. Any more questions or comments? Okay.
And as John stated, we look forward to working with you, answering any questions that you may have as you go through over the next month and a half before adoption.
All right. Thank you for putting this together, and we look forward to working with you. Ms. Hurley?
Okay, next on the agenda, we have a presentation by PK&S Company, and I think we have a few representatives here.
Yes. and just trying to sanitize a little bit.
I'll try.
Thank you, Ms. Owen, Mr. Pursuta. Greetings. If you would, please introduce yourselves.
I'm Mike Legger, partner with PKS and Company.
I'm Ashley Stern, a partner with PKS and Company.
I'm Ryan Taylor, a supervisor with PKS and Company.
Okay, you have the floor.
Okay. First off, thank you for inviting us here this morning. We have previously delivered and reviewed a draft of the financial statements and the management letters and reports with executive and the finance director. And our purpose today is to present the audit results, mention some of the key highlights, and then, of course, answer any questions you may have for us today. I'd like to begin with just the audit reports themselves, explaining what the results of those were. In the bound financial package, which is your 48-page document, the audit reports are pages 1 through 3. And on page 1, it kind of covers the management's responsibilities for the preparation and the fair presentation of the financial statements. Just as a reminder, the financial statements are the county's financial statements. They're not the auditors. The only thing in these documents are that are ours, and our responsibility is the report itself. So page 1 covers the management's responsibilities. The bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2 also cover our responsibility as auditors to gather evidence and perform audit procedures in order to express our opinion on those financial statements. The most important paragraph of that audit report is the opinion paragraph itself, which is on page 2 near the bottom. I'm happy to report that our opinion on the county's financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020 is unmodified. And this means that the financial statements present fairly the financial position of the county in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. This is also known as a clean opinion and is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as auditors. The final report is actually at the very end of the financial statements, and it's on pages 142 and 43. And that's our report on internal controls and compliance matters. Unlike the audit report, which I was just discussed on the financial statements, this is not an opinion on internal controls or compliance, but it's a report on any findings or deficiencies that we noted as a result of our audit testing. We did not identify any compliance issues with laws or regulations in our audit testing. However, we did identify and report 2 material weaknesses and 3 significant deficiencies, which are further explained on pages 144 through 148 of the financial statements. These were primarily related to account reconciliations and a lack of review and monitoring of financial records during fiscal year 2020. And so that's just kind of a summary of those, and I won't go through the details of those, but of course we'll answer any questions you might have on those findings. So that's kind of a summary of the 2 reports that are in there as a result of this year's audit, or 6/20/30 audit. And I'll turn it over to Ashley to kind of walk through some of the financial results with you.
Thank you, Mike. Again, before I begin, I want to just kind of point your attention to the 3 packets in front of you. So the thicker packet is our financial statements. The extremely thin packet is whichever one is fine, is our auditor's communications, so our required communications. And the packet that I'm going to kind of draw your attention to is the colored presentation packet. It's also what you'll see on the screens. So rather than flipping through each individual pages of 150-something pages, I'm going to draw your attention to some specific financial details. As I go through these details, I want to make sure to point out that this is really a snapshot in time, and really a snapshot in a not so good time in the middle of the pandemic. I was looking back on a couple key notes, and the stock market was down right as June 30th. We had some very large uncertainty, and a lot of the programs that we were just talking about with the fiscal year 22 budget had not been implemented yet. Some key financial highlights relating to your government-wide financial statements. So these can be found on page 15 of the financial statements when you're looking at it a little bit later. These are on the full accrual basis. So these are on the same basis as if any business or any publicly traded company that you were to go look at. So a very familiar basis, but not the budgetary basis that we're used to seeing the general fund on, or the modified accrual basis. The primary government includes your governmental and your business type activities, whereas we also have two component units, which include the Board of Education and the library. The unrestricted net position, or the health of the government, for the primary government was totaling $26.03 million, or 17.93% of the total net position. That's a $5 million increase from 2019. A couple key pieces to note about the government-wide financial statements. If you remember, in the past few years, we've implemented some major government accounting standards. There's been the pension accounting standard, which took all pension liabilities and put them on the county's financial statement. And then there was the other post-employment benefit accounting standard that added any OPEB plan or healthcare plans to the county's financial statements as well. And there's been some large fluctuations in those over the past year, especially due to investments in the plan's assets, as well as just some changes in the approaches of that from the actuary.
Ashley, can I ask you a question before
Yeah,
you
of
go any
course.
further? If we have questions, would you rather us ask you as you go along, or wait till you get done?
Go ahead and ask as we go along.
All right, just a real quick question on the unrestricted net position. Do you have any metrics for comparable purposes as to, just what that means? When you're give or take 18%, is that considered good, standard, typical, et cetera?
So typically, we like to look at some of those key standards with just looking at the general fund as well as each fund individually, because the government as a whole seeing an increase or decrease could really be an effect of things that are out of the county's control, like the pension, the other post-employment benefit plan, the investment market, as well as a few other things. So I do have some key metrics for you that I'll mention in just a second.
Okay, thank you.
So taking a look specifically at the general fund, some key highlights. Again, this is on that budgetary basis that we were just discussing with the budget presentation, or otherwise known as the modified accrual basis. The unassigned fund balance remains strong at just over $37 million, which is about 61% of total fund balance. In comparison, 2019 was just shy of 37 million, or 61% of total fund balance. So a little bit of an increase from of just the unassigned fund balance. General fund revenues decreased from 2019 by $1.2 million, and this mainly has to do with local income tax reduction. 2019 was a real anomaly in local income tax, a decrease in recordation tax, as well as a decrease in investment earnings. Total general fund expenditures before transfer increased by just over $5 million from 2019. This mostly has to do with an increase in your Board of Education funding due to maintenance of efforts, public health costs, as well as the timing of various capital projects that occurred. There was an increase in the fund balance for the general fund of $1.34 million from 2019 to 2020. Now, as I mentioned, the general fund fund balance one of the key metrics that the GFOA, or one of the governing boards of governmental accounting standards, recommends is that revenues, or that fund balance, be no less than 60 to 90 days of operating expenditures. So I think some key points of that would be is that 60 days would be fund balance of $23 million for the county. 90 days would be $34.5 million of operating expenditures. And the unassigned fund balance for the general fund is at $37 million. So we've got a little bit of a cushion. It's about 102 days of operating expenses, but that really is a significant method of showing the health of any government, any county. A few notes about the budget to actual revenues and expenditures. These can be found on page 115 when you look through the financial statements. Actual revenues were $1.7 million greater than budgeted amounts, or just a little bit over 1%. And a lot of that has to do with local income tax. Actual expenditures, this includes transfers and fund balance appropriation, were $2.97 million less than budget, or just about 2%. Taking a look at some of the general fund revenues, the budget presentation kind of stole my thunder with some of these graphs. But taking a look at the last 5-year trends of revenue, I really drew out property taxes and income taxes, because being the largest revenue sources for the general fund. And as you can see, it's been on a consistent increase. 2019 was really an anomaly, especially for income tax. That had to do with some tax overhauls at the federal government level that then delays down to the state of Maryland. But overall, we've seen a pretty consistent trend from year to year. Taking a look at general fund expenditures, I broke these down into type. We've got salaries, just any other operating costs, debt service, and then we broke out the Board of Education. Just as a note, that Board of Education amount is only the maintenance of efforts. Total Board of Education expenditures, including debt service, which is principal and interest on the bonds, is just north of $57 million. Similarly, with general fund expenditures, we've seen a consistent increase from year to year as expected. Salaries, other operating, as well as the Board of Education. Excuse me. One of the things us as accountants and auditors always like to take a look at is exactly how money is being spent, and I think a pie chart really does show that. Education, 37%. We broke it down into public safety, detention center, filing shortly there behind. And what I want to make sure to point out is that these percentages are very similar over the years. And that's something that we like to make sure that is happening. You don't want to see one year where Public Works is 45%, which would be more than education, and education drops. You want to see consistent spending of funds.
Ashley?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you think, what's your opinion as far as applying the actual debt service to the particular area where it should be, where it's the expenses are being incurred?
I actually see that quite frequently in some governments, but it really just depends on how you would like to see the expenditure. I think it provides more information, but at the same time, I do understand how it's being currently presented, but I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think, when you look at what education is 37%, we know that the majority of the debt service, that 11% debt service is most likely education.
Correct.
And my perspective, of course, the acting county executive would have to weigh in on this, and the finance director. I think it might be more beneficial to us and the public as a whole to recognize the true expenses that are going into education.
I think going forward, we could probably update this chart to even show that, to show the debt service allocated for that point. Thank you very much.
A few years ago.
Why don't you simply just provide both charts?
Or that.
That way you don't confuse is it in there or not in there. Just give both charts with and without.
We could do that.
A few years ago, they changed the benefits package and started charging those to each department. So this could be done the same way. It's more of I guess you call it truth in financing. And so.
get a true total cost of education.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
Good points.
Actually, I have a quick question. How does this compare with other counties, the size of ours? And
So most commonly, education is the highest expense in any county.
And public safety, I mean, it's.
it's relative.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty comparable to other counties as far as where the bulk of the expenditures are spent.
Well, actually, it can vary dramatically based on the maintenance of effort at the different counties. I mean, you go next door to Worcester County, they're a total flip of us. I mean, their education is, I think it's over 70%, because they get the least in the state, from the state of Maryland for education, where we're kind of reverse, one of the highest recipients of state dollars.
This is relatively similar with other counties.
From a
as far as
size.
percentages, okay.
From a size standpoint. Then taking a look at the fund balance, or I like to call this really the health of the general fund. As I mentioned, there's that GFOA recommendation that we like to take a look at, and the county is just about 102 days. When you see the darker green or the other, this includes items that are restricted. So it's fund balance that has been restricted for specific purposes, assigned and committed fund balance, also kind of set aside for additional purposes, as well as various non-spendable resources. So this really can change at any time. If a restriction is released or a committed expenditure occurs, those fund balances would be used instead of unassigned. Then I always like to bring up a few financial highlights from our enterprise funds. First, solid waste, we saw an increase in the net position of $1.2 million compared to a $68,000 increase in 2019. And the real key for our solid waste fund is that their financial reserve requirement is currently met. So as of June 30th, 2020, we're seeing a financial requirement that was met. A lot of the increase in net position had to do with timing of various capital projects for solid waste, whereas in 2019, those were able to be done. 2020, they were not. Forgive me, I have really bad allergies. Excuse me. For the airport, as we mentioned, this is a snapshot in time, right at a really rough time for any type of travel. Revenues decreased from 2019 by $201,000, whereas expenses increased by just about $215,000. We saw a decrease in net position of $2.3 million. One of the things that I like to mention is in that decrease in net position includes depreciation. So whereas we've had capital grants over the years, federal grants over the years that have funded the capital assets of the airport, you actually have to recognize that expense over time, whereas you recognize the income from that grant many years ago. So we're still seeing about $4.3 million in depreciation from years ago.
Could I ask you another question?
Yeah, of course.
From your perspective, do you think it may be time for the county to look at removing the airport as an actual enterprise fund and, put it into as a department within the county as well?
So we actually took a look at that most recently with the current acting executive and the finance director. And because of the COVID funds that are expected to come into the airport, their current budget does not include a general fund appropriation. So it's all about how the airport is being budgeted, if they're budgeted to cover their expenses, and how successful they are in that. But we have it still on our radar, kind of post-COVID funding, to see how they're doing. But I think it's time.
Okay, but I mean, you do bring up a really good point. And I would say probably 90% of the airport's issues are the fact of deferred maintenance, a lack of maintenance in the past, and we're making up for all that now. So if by chance the CARES funding can help us compensate for that, it may get us back to square one where as an operating body, it could become more profitable. But I don't know long-term, because I'm not quite familiar with exactly what is going to impact which area and what the current revenues are now. So taking all of that in consideration, let's say the CARES applies greatly to maintenance issues, are they possibly getting back on their feet where we could keep them as an enterprise account?
So I think and I'm going to flip forward. Ryan, do you mind flipping forward to the airport trend? So I think the trends that we really look at in relation to the airport, now 2020 being an odd year for any type of travel agency or travel industry, you can see where 2019 revenues increased to $1.4 million, whereas expenses were still being managed. So I've seen a positive trend from the airport outside of the capital grants. So I've been looking at the change in net position. 2016 included large capital grants, which then, of course, were recognizing the expenses later. But 2019 was a positive year, taking out depreciation. So I think we were headed in the right direction. Thus, we hadn't made the change thus far. But I think it's something to still monitor.
Thank you.
Do you mind flipping back to solid waste? We also took a look at a trend for solid waste. I think it's good to take a look at this over time. Revenues for solid waste have consistently increased. We saw about $8.5 million in revenues from the solid waste fund, as well as expenses were at $7.3 million. Again, I mentioned there were certain projects that, with COVID weren't able to take place, thus we're not seeing the expenses here. But overall, we've seen some good trends for solid waste, and most importantly, they've met that financial requirement. Let's skip through airport. Then, now that we've taken a look at the previous 12 months, let's take a look kind of forward. What's going to affect the county going forward? Of course, we're going to see some new funding coming from each of the programs, CARES funding or the American Recovery Plan funding. But we also have a couple new government accounting standards. These have been delayed 1 year due to COVID. They did a big delay, the Accounting Standards Board. So you have heard about these previously. Fiduciary activities will be implemented for fiscal year 2021, and this will have an effect on the county's financial statements because of the various fiduciary funds the county has, as well as GASB Statement Number 87, leases. This is really redefining what our understanding of operating leases or just general rental is, and it's actually taking them and putting them as right-of-use assets and right-of-use liabilities on the government's financial statements. So it's going to have a pretty unique effect on the financial statements.
How would that affect their leasing of vehicles that's currently being done?
So the leases of the vehicles would then be treated as right-of-use assets and right-of-use liabilities on the government-wide financial statements. So on that first financial statements, but for the general fund, they would eventually be expensed just like a normal lease. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions, comments? Okay.
We really appreciate your time, and I do want to make sure to say thank you to Ms. Olin, the finance director, and acting executive John Pasoda. Was a pleasure to work with this year, and we really appreciate their help and cooperation.
What's that? Mr. Holloway?
I know the finance department's been bringing in another firm to help them come up with their settlements at the end of the year. Is that going to end anytime soon, or?
I haven't currently talked with the finance department if that's going to occur for 2021, but I see a light at the end of the tunnel from that occurring.
Okay, thank you.
I think
Oh, yeah.
the same I would think would apply with the reconciliations that you had noted in your deficiencies.
Correct.
Because we recognize the fact that we've got a lot of work to clean up here.
Yeah, there was a big transition here for everyone.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I have confidence it'll work. Yeah.
Ms. Ackley?
I had a question, if recognizing we do have some things we need to correct, and is there anything, looking at even the structure of our government, that we need to implement to make sure that these things are being followed up on? We do have an internal auditor, so there are some things that we can follow if we need to use the auditing plan. Anything you want to speak to on that?
I think one of the things that we've noted from a structure standpoint has just been empty positions. And I think that's important in any internal control structure.
And significant turnover. I mean, even when positions were filled, they were sometimes turning over quickly. So every time you're bringing somebody new in, you're starting over. So it's not, I think the number of positions is fine. It's just a matter of keeping the same folks in there and getting them trained so that they can essentially do their job. And I think right now, I'm not sure we're fully staffed.
I think we have one
If
open position.
One position that's not filled, but I think you've got good people in there now in place. So going forward, we're looking for some improvement.
And then to touch on your comment with the internal auditor, I think there are some good key follow-up reports that could be done from our suggestions, and we're happy to talk with the internal auditor or Ms. Hurley about any testing that could be done kind of throughout the year to help with the controls.
I think that would be beneficial moving forward because we have our plan, it presents the auditing plan, and so we can make changes to that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Ms. Harley?
And the next item of business is resolution number 32-2021. This is authorizing the acting county executive to accept grant funds in the amount of $17,268 from the Maryland Department of Commerce, acting through the Maryland Tourism Development Board, to be used to market Maryland small businesses for tourism. And we have Mr. Steve Miller here, I believe, who is the Director of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism, if there are any questions.
All right, need a motion to approve resolution number 32-2021.
So moved.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second, do we have any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 32-2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution number 32-2021 passes unanimously. Ms. Hurley.
Next for your consideration is resolution number 33-2021. This is to increase the fees of certain recreational programs.
Need a motion to approve resolution number 33-2021.
So moved.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second, any discussion? Mr. Holloway. Oh, I seen you going for the mic.
Well, I wasn't ready to speak, but I will. I'm not going to support this. This should have been done during the budget process, and this is not the time to raise fees on the citizens of Wycomico County. There has been COVID funds coming in, and I think they could be used for this, so I'm not going to support this.
Some good points. Any more comments? Discussion. All in favor of resolution number 33-2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Opposed.
Chair votes nay. Passes 1, 2, 3, 4 to 2. Ms. Ackley left the room.
Okay, next is resolution number 34-2021. This is to appoint the Board of Managers of various public drainage associations within Wycomico County. The proposed resolution shows the managers for each public drainage association, so I'm not going to read the names unless you want me to. And we do have Mrs. Pam Olin here, Director of Finance, to answer any questions.
All right, need a motion to approve resolution number 34-2021.
So moved.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 34-2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution passes with 6 votes.
Next is resolution number 35-2021. This is to certify the drainage tax roll to the Department of Finance as requested by the Board of Managers of the Public Drainage Association. The resolution shows the amount per acre for crop, wood, and the minimum amount for the tax levy, and this is per drainage association.
Need a motion to approve resolution number 35-2021.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 35-2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution number 35-2021 passes with 6 votes. Ms. Hurley, do we need to vote to leave legislative session?
You do, yes.
All right, need a motion to adjourn out of legislative session and convene an Urban Services Commission.
So moved.
Got a motion, I need a second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we're in the Urban Services Commission. Ms. Hurley?
Okay, before you is resolution number 01-2021. This is to approve an invoice and payment for a Village Downriver sewage system repair pursuant to the amended and restated shared facility agreement between Wacomico County, Maryland, Wacomico County Urban Services Commission, and the Village Downriver Condominium Association. And we do have Mr. Mark Abresh here, who is the president of the Village Downriver Condominium Association, as well as Richard Strimple, who is a member of the Board of Directors, and Mr. Mark Whitelock is here as well from our Public Works Department.
All right, need a motion to approve resolution number 01-2021.
So moved.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I would only like to say that I'd like to thank President, is it Abrish? And the board for the work, because it's not easy. I don't know if there's any resolution from a county perspective as how we could possibly find ways to make this a better solution. This is sort of a new project, a whole new process for Wycomico County when we implemented this. And any input from it, the board or you yourself would be beneficial in the long run, I think. I'm not quite sure where we would or where we could go. But I think if you look at the responsibility of homeowners taking over a wastewater treatment facility, I think it's very easy for things to go askew. And I applaud you for keeping this in line and helping Wycomico County with this whole process.
Well, thank you. We're interested.
If
Can you
could
go to the
go to the
mic,
podium,
please?
that would be great, yes.
Yes, thanks. We were put in an unusual position when the developer turned over the development to us with only 50% build out. So there are insufficient residents there really to support the facility. And this piezometer that we're talking about here was incorrectly installed back in 2008. Is that when it was? When it was originally installed. And it's been that way since then. And the developer knew it, and he never had it relocated or anything else. And since the developer turned over the community to us, to the homeowners, we've discovered many other things that were done improperly and are going to cost us money down the road. And so anyway, this is a small part of it, operating this septic system that we have.
Could I ask you, how about Maryland Environmental Services' role in this? Did they not recognize the improper installation in the beginning?
Yes, they did, and they told the developer about it, but he didn't do anything about it. He never.
They didn't follow up on it?
I don't know. I don't know what happened, and I have only been in the community since 2018.
For the record, can you state your name and position?
My name is Richard Strimple, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors.
Okay, thank you.
Has this invoice, has this work been done
No, it has not.
yet?
So the work has not been done.
That's correct.
And who will monitor the work being done when it's me over here talking.
Oh, okay. I can't tell. Can't see any lips moving.
Who will monitor that this is done correctly when it's?
Well, I don't know. Who does that, Mark? Does the county come and inspect it, or is it just the environmental company?
Can
If you want to
use
sit at the
mic?
table, that would be fine.
Yeah, if you two would like, come to the table. There's 2 mics, and then please identify yourself as well for the record.
My name is Mark Arbus. I'm also a member of the board. And
Can you pull your mask down? It's
And-
kind of muffled. I'm sorry.
That's fine. And the president of the VDR.
Okay, and you were saying?
John Hines Company is the one that is proposed to do the work. I'm not sure who's doing the inspection of it afterwards. The county, I am assuming, would look at it. The state itself, I have not gotten any information from the state about any inspections that have occurred over this period of time from 2008 to present. We turn in our information to them, but that's the last I hear of it. So I have no idea. And to be very truthful with you, in the turnover, there were no records whatsoever turned over to us about anything that.
Yeah.
So we were working from basically starting from scratch in 2018.
Mr. Wilbur, is there something that the county should be following up with to make sure that the Maryland Environmental Services, because they are supposed to be the oversight organization, as I understand it, and even with the transition, the turnover of all the documentation, I would have thought they had oversight on that as well. Is there anything we can do from a legal perspective with the county to ensure that MES is handling their responsibilities?
Can you go to the podium?
Let's go to that mic
Mr.
up there.
Wilbur.
Yes, Paul Wilbur, County Attorney. Yes, we can certainly try to assist Village Downriver making a contact with Maryland Environmental Service, MDE also.
Because at some point in time, this could very well be the county's responsibility anyway.
Yeah, that's going to be determined in the future, yes.
Is there an annual inspection done on this system that's make sure it's working right or anything like that?
The only knowledge I have is that we have someone that comes in on a daily basis that oversees the whole operation, but from an inspection point, I've never heard of one, never seen anyone ever come to the plant, as long as I...
And that's exactly my concern, Mr. Wilbur, is when we put all this together, we were under the I don't know, we had the understanding that MES was going to be the major control of this, not a homeowners association.
Right.
We recognize that they have to have some responsibilities as far as the collection of the fees, et cetera, and there's some interaction also involved one-on-one, but MES was supposed to have the
Right.
pure oversight with inspections and control.
That's
So,
correct, yes.
Yeah.
I might mention that the operation of that system is the single largest budget item in our condominium association budget. And it costs a lot of money to operate that thing every year. What is it now?
It's approximately $48,000
A year.
a year.
Yeah.
I see Mr. Whitelock came in the room. Do you have any input on this, Mr. Whitelock?
You have to use the
Yeah, we're
microphone
going to
and
have to
share.
go to the mic.
It is my understanding when they put the piezometer in, the piezometer was placed 150 foot out of place, and it's not conducive with the other piezometers are around it. It's also my understanding that the plant functions based off of the pressures in these piezometers, and this one being off, and there's a deviation in the groundwater levels on that piezometer that are increasing the pressures and actually kicking out the pump that takes care of the wastewater side of that process.
I think we were talking more about the responsibility of who's supposed to do the inspections and make sure it's operating correctly.
The oversight.
Oversight of it, I think.
Well, I would say, so I did hear you ask
Is
about.
the county going to do inspections when this work is done, or someone else, or?
That I am not aware of. I would say this, my background is solid waste operations or a system that's there. So I heard you ask about annual inspection of these systems. If MES is coming in every day, the same as we do with the landfill, we catch and fix as we go. We don't let it accumulate up to be a problem where it's going to be found somewhere else. It's pretty much a fix and function operation.
I think a work session in the near future is probably in order so that we can get this straight.
Yeah.
And I think we should invite MES and Mr. Whitelock and maybe some of the board members.
One other question I did have
Yep.
to the homeowner association, the developer, I'm assuming, is still paying their share of the amounts owed on an annual basis timely?
No. It never has.
Never has. From 2008.
I think there was an agreement that, Mr. Wilbur, if I'm wrong, didn't the county specifically make an agreement with the developer that he would maintain his responsibility?
That's correct. And if he's not then that may be a legal issue.
He's a,
Sounds like it.
he's a lot owner just like all the others. So he has to pay- he is a lot owner just like the other lot owners.
And actually, we've taken the court for that, and the court has also decided that he was a lot owner and was obligated to pay.
But he still refuses.
But he
to-
hasn't.
But he still refuses to pay.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure we had a work session
Yeah.
where we actually went through negotiations with them
With him.
to make that commitment and to
That's
follow through
correct.
with that commitment.
Yeah.
He has told me and the community numerous times that he was not obligated as a developer to pay any dues or any fees to the community. And he's made that clear numerous times. So that's all we had to go on until recently.
I'm probably going to have to dig up the minutes of that meeting, too.
So, battle for us to try to get any monies.
So how many lots does he have that he's not paying on?
16 currently.
16? Now, is there any other lots that's undeveloped that other people own that are paying?
They all pay
They all pay
their
their,
appropriate share.
even though they're not using the system?
Correct.
Did you, off the top of your head, how many is that? 4? Okay. And how many lots are developed? 27. So if everybody paid their fair share, that would probably make you guys whole, a lot more whole.
Go a long way.
If
Yeah.
everybody was paying their fair share into it right now, our total dues collected for the year is approximately $78,000. Our budget for this year is about 98.
I'm sorry, do what?
Our budget, our expenses is about 98.
For the year.
We're still 20,000
I
short.
see.
But you're only bringing in 78.
We're only bringing 70 because we are only about 60%, 66% occupied.
Right, capacity.
So we were put in a very horrible position to begin with.
Okay. Any more questions or comments?
Paul, do you have anything?
No.
Okay.
Sooner than later, Mr. Wilbur.
So I'm
Yes.
sorry, I just have a quick question.
Exactly.
Is there funds in this agreement?
SRF?
Yeah.
There is funds there. I don't know the exact funds right now. I'm thinking somewhere right around $60,000.
Okay.
So there are, and we contribute to that on a yearly
Yeah.
basis,
Right.
something 170.
And there is something to take out of it, though. I mean,
And yes, there is money to take out
okay.
that we could utilize.
Mr. Wilbur, I would have another question as well. How is it possible to be selling additional properties at this location? Because, for financing and I guess all disclosures that are going to be necessary,
Right.
how is it possible for the developer or individuals to sell properties or sell homes in this association?
Well, a question I would have is, as the developer is selling the homes, is the association collecting the arrearage on these lots?
No. We were not allowed to do that, or.
Can you speak into the mic?
Excuse me, no, we have not done that because we did not know that we were allowed to collect that because until sometime in the court made the decision that he should have been paying. Well, we've made an agreement with, for the settlement of the current 16 lots, that we have another developer coming in to buy them from Mr. Pusey. They're going to pay some of the back dues, basically from 2018 to current. And somewhat, but the dues owed from 2008 to 2017, Mr. Pusey himself has said that will never happen.
He's saying that he won't pay that.
He will not pay that.
Well, I think, again, you should be aware of what the county's agreement is with him and his obligation, and the new developer who may be purchasing those properties should also be aware of what that obligation is.
Right. I believe there was litigation between Village Downriver and the developer.
There is litigation.
Right.
Currently, but it's been postponed, obviously, because of.
It's been postponed because of COVID.
Three times now because of COVID, so that has also hurt us to a certain.
And does the association have an attachment or something to those properties? where he can't sell them?
We had a lien against him. We still do, because this settlement hasn't gone through. Part of what he wants us to do, 2017, into the settlement agreement, where we will forgive him for those. We're not
Not going to.
inclined to do that.
Okay.
But as I said, we're in a very tough position. And another thing that has come up recently, just so the county is aware, we've been notified by,
Speak closer into the microphone.
Yeah,
we've been notified that.
when the light doesn't come on,
Come
it
on,
means
that-
you're not speaking loud enough.
That we can't have any future bills in the community because there's a question about the impervious usage that has already been used within the community. They're saying that we're over. Everything that I've seen so far data-wise shows that we are well under and well within the impervious. So right now, nothing can be built, so nothing can be sold. That even hurts the community even more. So that issue is a little bit different than what we're asking for right now, but I think that's something that the county needs to look into to make sure that we are not put in a position where we're just plain dead in the water.
Who has issued that?
We've got notification from Tyler Walston and Rick Dwyer that that was put on hold. I don't know how long of a hold they're talking about, because I think they mentioned that they wanted to come out and do a survey of all the current properties out there to see what the impervious usage is now, so that they can move forward. But I've already looked at some of their charts that they have made up, and none of them are even accurate because they don't even have current homes on there, and some of the homes have been there, like mine, for 11 years. A certain portion of it, which is my driveway, doesn't even have an impervious amount associated to it. So it is a very inaccurate piece of document. So I'm not sure how they can even determine what impervious amount is in the community.
I believe Mr. Wilbur.
Mr. Wilbur.
Is meeting with the planning, right?
This issue has definitely been on the front burner for about a week, and we are having a meeting tomorrow, an internal meeting, and then we will have a meeting involving Village Downriver soon thereafter to address these impervious surface issues.
The question I have, is it appropriate to approve the invoice and payment right now when we don't know what's going on and no work has been done?
Well, this money, I think we're starting to mix apples and oranges a little bit, because this money is, they put the money in there annually just for this purpose, for maintenance and repair items. So I think it's, I think this issue alone, we just need to treat separate. Because I think, just personally, I think we're fine on this, because this is the agreement. Annually they contribute so much, the funds are there for this purpose. All these other issues are things that, they need to be resolved.
We need another work session for that specifically. Mr. Wilbur?
My suggestion would be to, if the council wishes, approve the amount, and then when the invoice is submitted, it will be dispersed.
Okay.
There's one other issue that I might mention, and that's regarding the roads in the community. The developer was required to build them to county standards, but it appears they were not built to county standards, and they're failing. They're breaking up all over the place. We're starting to get little holes and lots of cracks and that sort of thing developing. And the developer was supposed to put a final top coat on the roads, but that was never done. And so that's another issue that we're dealing with.
That's another issue we'll have to discuss in the work session. All right, any more discussion?
Sorry you've all been
Ms.
through
Ackley?
this. I'm sorry you've all been through this. It sounds like this is,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
As I understand it as well, county ordinance requires that the developer is responsible for those roads and the completion and any damages, and I believe it's up to 3 years after the project itself has been, the build-out has been complete. So, Mr. Wilbur, I would think that also that they would be responsible for the situation with the roads as well. I don't think that has that responsibility has transferred to the county just yet. I don't think we've accepted those roads as county roads yet. No, we have not. So we'll take that into consideration as well. I really appreciate you being here, and sorry about the difficulties.
Thanks for listening to us.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? All right. All in favor of resolution number 32-2021, please say aye.
This is 01-2021.
What's that? It is. I'm looking ahead. Thank you, Ms. Hurley. All in favor of resolution number 01-2021?
Aye.
Aye.
Second, or yes.
All right. What happened?
You stopped. You didn't finish your statement.
Oh,
Aye.
all right. Any opposed, please say nay. All right, chair votes aye. Resolution passes. Thank you. At this time, need a motion to adjourn from Urban Services Commission and reconvene in the legislative session.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Hitchens.
Good morning. Call your attention to Resolution 36, 2021, to accept the internal auditor's report on the workplace culture audit.
Okay. Need a motion to approve resolution number 36-2021 and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
If you'd like, I can present a little on this audit.
Can you do a brief presentation?
So the purpose of the audit was to understand and quantify the workforce's perception of attributes that contribute to the overall workplace culture. Workplace culture can simply be described as the way we do things around here. This was much different than any audit we've done in the past because it's not tangible data. It's what would be considered soft data. So trying to quantify that, and being the first time we've done it, I took a very broad approach and focused on 8 different categories, such as management performance, workplace safety, product service delivery, communication, career enrichment. At the time of the audit, there were about 585 employees, and 213 employees did complete the survey, which allowed for a margin of error of 5.4%, which is pretty high. Even if we got 100 or so more responses, that margin of error wouldn't have changed significantly. So I think 213 was a good number. I'm not going to go through all of the, I put a lot of data into the report just for department heads and employees that may want to look into it and see how the results were, but I am going to go over the schedule of findings and recommendations, which are more or less recommendations more than findings, because of my opinion of what was significant and also what could be changed in the county without a lot of investment. The first was email accounts and communication. About 30% of employees believe that communication currently is by word of mouth in an informal way, whereas 4% or so want it to be that way. So every department in the county is different. You have some departments where people won't ever use a computer. So I would, from a high level, I would recommend that each department figure out a efficient way to make sure that every employee is getting communication in an equal manner. The second recommendation was for exit interviews. I found that HR was not compiling the data to use in an aggregate manner. So when you look at an exit interview in a vacuum, it may not tell you a whole lot, but if you keep track of that data and you find it a dozen or so times, it may start to be significant. Jackie Curry's actually already gotten back to me and shown me a program she's developed to track that, and it looks great, actually. So that's nice to see. The next two, employee education and promotions, kind of go hand in hand. Keep in mind, this is a perception thing. We have chapters in the personnel manual that touch on these subjects. It doesn't mean they're not being done, doesn't mean their program doesn't exist, but from the survey results, the perception of employees is that they're not happening. So as far as employee education and training, I would certainly recommend that management makes sure employees and department heads are aware of the program and how to use it, and that way employees can take advantage of any training opportunities that they may want to have budgeted. Same thing with promotions and in-house hiring, just making sure that employees perceive that opportunities are available equally. Perhaps that could be, having a board where job postings are posted first for employee consideration and in-house promotions. But I don't manage how the solution comes about. Employee recognition was also a place that scored low at like 35%. Again, this is a recommendation for every department to look at their department and consider what's best for them. One department may do birthday celebrations, another may do lunch out every month. Some departments have 3 different shifts and they work 24-hour operations, so that would certainly change how they would approach something like this. Some departments are large enough, they have 100 or so, they can do an employee of the month, and you could actually cycle through. If you take a small department and you do employee of the month, then everyone's going to get it once every few months, so it wouldn't work. And finally, would be the mission and vision statements. Just taking the mission and vision statements and, again, tailoring it to each department. Some departments have their own individual mission statement already, and a majority probably do not. But just taking the overall mission statement from the county, applying it to your department to make it personal for them. And that's it.
All right, do we have any questions for Mr. Hitchens?
Just a quick comment, Levin, just thanks for referencing the mission and vision statements in the strategic plan, because this is part of the strategic plan.
Right, yep, it fit nicely into it.
And I think it should be pointed out that the employee recognition is important, and you said it was something like 35%?
Yeah, about 35% of employees believe that there is sufficient recognition right now.
Should be higher.
I would think so.
Yeah. All right, any more questions or comments?
I have a question.
Ms. Hackley?
I saw on, let's see, page 10, the strategies recommendation and the update.
Can you speak louder?
The updating of the personnel manual and then the amendment to the charter to allow for employees by the Board of Education to serve in the county's legislative branch. Was that from the county employees made that request, or?
Nope, that's actually from page 8 of this county's 2019 to 2022 strategic plan. So that part in the box is actually taken verbatim from the strategic plan.
I see, okay, all right, thanks.
Is there a time where you would consider, or does any part of your data suggest a variation between different departments? And I know that's probably the acting county executive's responsibility. I'm just curious.
So I did not, I'm sure there is variation between the departments, but I did not create the survey or send it out in a way to be able to track that. I wanted it to be as anonymous as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I didn't, because if you have a small department like finance or purchasing, and if you start to isolate that, then you know who's saying what, and I didn't even want to know who was saying what. But I'm sure there are cultural differences between many departments that they'll have to address.
I think also, too, retirees, it wouldn't hurt to have some kind of an idea of how retirees or what their impressions are of how the county's communicating with them as well, and whether they're being treated fairly.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I don't know how we would go about getting their contact information in order to do that, but if we had their contact information, it's certainly something we could do.
I think Human Resources would probably have that because they're receiving benefits, so they might have that.
They send emails as well as letters. So any more questions or comments from Mr. Hitchens? All right, thank you, Mr. Hitchens.
Thank you.
If you want to discuss this any further, let us know. put my glasses on to read this. All in favor of resolution number 36-2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution number 36-2021 passed unanimously. This time, we're going to open the floor to public comments. Please limit all your public comments to 3 minutes or less, and any presented material may be submitted to the council members. And if you do so, please include 10 copies. Do we have any public comments? Any public comments? All right, council comments. Any council comments? All right, I do want to make mention of Little League's in session. Saturday was open day for a lot of the Little Leagues around here, and Mr. Miller had put out a request for a need for volunteers for the county's Challenger baseball program. They need coaches and buddies, so if anyone's interested, please contact Mr. Miller at the Civic Center or Parks and Recs. That said, need a motion to adjourn and a second from legislative session and go into open work session, followed by a closed work session pursuant to the general provisions article, section 3-305B1, 3, and 4 as follows. To discuss personnel matter pertaining to the Director of Local Management Board, to protect the confidentiality of the individuals, and to discuss potential land acquisition for the borough pit material to protect the county's bargaining power, and to consider a matter that concerns the proposal for a business to locate, expand, or remain in the state to protect the identity of the business operation. Need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. This time, we're going to go into open work session with Mr. Rice.
Good morning.
Morning.
Nicholas Rice, purchasing agent for Wycomico County. I can go over just some brief data, and then I can open it up to questions of the council members.
All right.
So we currently have, within the county, 59 vehicles under lease through Enterprise, out of a total of 132. In the 2 years or 2 to 3 years that we've signed on to this program, the average fleet age and model years went from 2008 to 2015. When we partnered with Enterprise, we had 69 vehicles over 10 years old. We've been able to reduce this down to 21. If we fully implement the leasing program, which I anticipate we can do in the next 2 or 3 years, we would see our monthly maintenance rate hover around $40 to $50 per month per vehicle. And that's opposed to, in 2018, the average maintenance was roughly $141 per month per vehicle. We've seen our fuel costs go down from 2008. In 2018, it was $211,200. And in the past year, we recorded fuel transactions of roughly $103,000. Now, obviously, part of that is due to COVID and less travel on the vehicles, but that is something that we are seeing as we get newer vehicles, better miles per gallon, better gas mileage. So if I have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes.
Did you have a question? I know we mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, Mr. Rice, appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
The issues that came up when we initially started this program, first of all, I've always felt that if you're going to purchase and you're going to keep the vehicle more than 3 years, you buy it, you don't lease it. The numbers, as I understand it, just don't add up. So if the county looks at our vehicles and how extended the period of time is that we're going to keep those vehicles, it's more than 3 years, you buy it.
Correct. And with this plan, we would roughly be around every 2 or 3 years, we would be selling out those vehicles and replacing them.
Sure you would, because the company wants to keep leasing them to the county.
Correct.
But and believe me, I understand, the leasing program, I think, had a great silver lining. There was a really good purpose in it, and that's the fact that I think that the amount of vehicles that we had that were well beyond their driving safety age needed to be replaced. And the sheriff was saying in order to even maintain, he'd have to do 12 a year. So we fully recognize that the county was way behind in their upkeep as far as buying vehicles. I think everyone had over 120,000 miles on it, not only Sheriff's Department, Civic Center, Recreation and Parks as well. Something had to come in, I think, as a quick fix. But the reason I was asking John and Pam earlier was because I was hoping that somewhere through your evaluations or maybe finance, someone is taking a look at this. And so, I mean, everybody knows that the fuel costs and the maintenance costs, sure, they're going to go down. But I don't think that's really a proper comparison, because they'd be going down if they were new vehicles as well.
Correct. It would just be a larger burden up front to buy these vehicles versus lease them, which essentially is spreading our payments over a 5-year period. And then if we sell that vehicle around year 3, the equity that we would receive on top of that sale would go towards future. For instance, when I'm asking for a revenue side or an expense side to lease the vehicles, I'm also taking into account on the revenue side that we're going to recognize the sale price of the vehicles that it is replacing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But you're talking about getting into a full leasing mode here in the next couple of years or whatever. I would really like to see maybe if the internal auditor, and I know that we attempted to do this a few years back, but it was too early. But whether or not we're at the stage now where we can do a clear evaluation of where we should go from here, and I could be way off base. It could be 90% of the major corporations in the United States take on a leasing program as opposed to a purchase program. I just like to have it, see if it's going to be evaluated.
Yeah, I think at that time, Mr. Cannon, we said, the internal auditor at the time said, after year 5 would be your best bet to combine the data. Right now, we really only have 2 years to go off of, because we started in 2018, but we did not lease any vehicles in this current fiscal year 21. So we did roughly 30 to 40 vehicles in the first year, and then another 20 or so in the second year.
Yep,
the most important piece of data, I think, and we're not going to have this yet, will be what these leased vehicles sell back for. It was very optimistic on the selling price. So until we get a good sample size of that, it's going to be very hard to evaluate the program, because the program really pivots on how well Enterprise can sell those vehicles back. And if they sell them well enough, we get money back that we can then turn around into the next lease. And that's how the program's supposed to be self-sustaining and more beneficial. But Nick, that's going to be,
well, and a little bit,
are we going to start selling those?
Yeah, a little bit to that point. Obviously, you recognize that the fleet was very old and very aging. So in year 1, some of those vehicles were going for a couple $100s. So you weren't seeing a revenue side that was complementing the expense side. Year 2 was a little bit better. We're in a position now where you're going to start seeing us sell off some 2016s, 2017 year models, and that's where Enterprise is going to come in and say the buying power that they have to buy these vehicles and lease them to us at that cost, and then what they can sell what they can turn around and sell those for at the market, when that's what we're also relying on Enterprise to tell us the market when that used vehicle is at its peak, because we want to sell it, like you said, year 2, year 3, depending on what the vehicle is at its peak, so that we recognize that that revenue side of it that's going to offset the expense side of it.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it had only been 2018. I thought we'd been doing this longer, but yeah, it is going to take a little more time. But they make it so easy that you just don't want to get away from it. I understand that. It's going to take a little more work to try to see if we get back to purchasing or not. But I was very disappointed when they first came to us in the original work session, and part of their data they were using to justify the leases included maintenance and included fuel costs. And at the time, we shared with them, well, you're going to get that with new vehicles anyway, so I don't understand why you want.
You are correct. It's just a matter of, it would take us over $1 million a year to flip the fleet as quickly as what you're saying, to recognize that maintenance and fuel costs quickly.
Right.
Whereas with Enterprise coming in and spreading those payments over a 5-year period, you can replace 40 vehicles a year versus 10. And you're quickly recognizing the maintenance and the fuel costs. But you are correct. No matter if you lease or buy a new vehicle, you're getting that advantage. It's just how quickly can you do that, and how much of an ask, if you want to buy, are you able to swallow as the county to say, well, we need to spend $1 million to replace half the fleet this fiscal year?
Yeah, I mean, whether or not we treat it as a major capital expense and recognize that, no different than schools, no different than other major capital expenses we have in roads, et cetera,
And then
capital expenses.
also my experience has been, since I've been here, each department is different. Some departments maintain their vehicles really well, some don't. So the way we used to do it, it was very broken down, and each department kind of handled their own. With the enterprise lease program and having the maintenance program, these vehicles are being maintained regularly when they're supposed to. The data is going to the enterprise manager, who's then coming down to me saying this vehicle, if there's a vehicle that's not operating correctly, if they see something off with the miles per gallon on the vehicle, they'll raise a red flag. You might want to have this vehicle checked out. So there is a benefit of having Enterprise's management team on staff because we don't have that in-house.
Mr. Rice, did Mr. Pizzotta mention selling some cars during the budget session? The presentation?
Yes, if whatever we lease, and it's rough, I want to say it was between 20 and 30 vehicles we were anticipating and leasing in FY22. There's going to be a vehicle that we will sell off. We're not adding to the fleet. When a department comes and requests for a leased vehicle, we ask which vehicle we're getting rid of. So there's a like for like in terms of what's being sold and what's being leased.
Okay. You can continue, thank you.
Yep.
Any more comments? Mr. Hastings.
I would just say that the ongoing question in my mind too, I'm always looking forward, and it's not the question for probably here or now, but we've already heard the first U.S. manufacturer say they're no longer going to make vehicles that are combustion related. GM said that earlier this year, and then we also have, of course, we know Tesla, we know Ford has already said that they're heading in the same direction, Jaguar. So I'm just want to make sure that we have the right infrastructure going forward, and that's maybe not a question to you, Nick, as it is to all the rest of us and to the county executive's office who's thinking this through, but we do need to plan for a future where we have the infrastructure to be able to support our fleet. And I say that also knowing that a couple other jurisdictions, municipalities, as well as counties and others are looking towards, that's the next kind of phase of where they're going, is transitioning their fleets to electric, knowing that has to happen. So whatever we can do to continue to plan for that future here in Wycomico, that would probably be helpful. So
absolutely.
I want to make that note.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I made a note, I think Mr. Councilman Hastings suggested Teslas and Jaguars.
Yeah.
Is that the
I don't think that would go over very well.
If you could put that into the council budget, part of the.
It'd be interesting. Any more questions or comments?
It is being recorded and we'll be approving the minutes in 2 weeks.
Mr. Hastings? All right.
Thank
Anything
you.
else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
Absolutely.
It was a great update and look forward to hearing more about it.
All right. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we're going to do the quarterly report for the airport. Mr. Tony Rudy is going to do the CARES Act grant funding.
Good morning, Tony Rudy, Airport Manager.
Good morning.
So since we last reported to the council on December 1st, Salisbury Airport was given approval on March 19th of this year by the FAA to allow for a CARES Act grant amendment in the amount of $1,860,000 out of the original grant amount that was $18,120,000, $304. And that's to be used for our taxiway Alpha reconstruction project. That project was identified in an earlier resolution last year as a planned and approved for use of CARES funds. Reimbursement request number 2 was submitted to the FAA on March 18th of this year in the amount of $806,372.62. This was for operating and maintenance expenses incurred from approximately May through August of last year. The submission also included payroll between February and June of 2020 FAA responded to us and returned a submission requesting updated information that's now they're now requiring for submitting reimbursement requests. The new procedure requires submission of a very detailed spreadsheet listing each and every item on every invoice we receive and every receipt that we have, along with a sufficient description of each item, the specific use, the details of the work that was completed, the dates of when we received the invoice and payments are made, and other information. So the reporting is actually expanded quite a bit. Our airport accountant is continuing to work on gathering this information. We're hoping to have that resubmitted very soon. After we do that, the future reimbursement requests will be submitted after that. We're coming up with a kind of a spreadsheet formula going forward so we can have this information readily available for the FAA. But going back in time to research this is just taking us some time.
So Tony, do you have a spreadsheet internally that utilizes this entire $18 million grant? I mean, gets us there within that time parameter we got to work within?
For our expenses?
Yes.
Or you're talking for the reporting?
Well, for the future report, I mean, because
Yeah.
we're kind of, we chip away here as we're going along, but there's still a lot of money on the
Yeah.
table, so.
When we've got this notice from the FAA, we sat back and decided, we need to come up with a plan on how to make this information readily available, because it's always, when you go backwards in time, trying to figure out a receipt from Home Depot that has 12 items on it, what are each of these items used for? So, internally, we have a spreadsheet that everyone's going to be familiar with and keeping track of this information going forward. The Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act that was signed into law on December 27th, 2020. That includes nearly $2 billion in funds to be awarded as economic relief to eligible U.S. airports and eligible concessions at those airports. And that money is meant to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus disease pandemic. SBY Airport has applied to the FAA for a grant of $1,023,818 in funding for operational and maintenance expenses, and also another grant for $15,016 for concession relief. The grant offer has not been received as of yet. And then on March 19th, the FAA announced the establishment of the Airport Rescue Grants to distribute $8 billion in funds that Congress approved as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. And the American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law on March 11th of this year. And the FAA is now working on distributing funds to eligible airports and concessionaires at those airports. To assist the industry, again, for preventing, preparing for, and responding to ongoing public health emergency. And specific grant amounts are not known at this time. Once they are known, the airport will be applying for a grant if we're earmarked for any of those funds. And that's my report. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Rudy? Any comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Rudy.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the West Metro Core Program Open Space Conversion to Conley Mill property. Mr. Steve Miller.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Steve Miller, I'm the Director of Recreation Parks and Tourism.
Katie Rouse, Deputy Director of Recreation Parks and Tourism.
Okay.
Thank you for having us this morning. I'm here to talk about a proposed program open space land conversion from the West Metro Core property. to the Conley Mill property. As you all may know, the West Metro Core property was purchased back in 2009 by the county using state program open space funds. This was before my time, but I believe the thought process was that developments were going to continue to move out towards the West Metro Core part of the county, and this property was intended at one time to be built into a sports complex in order to meet that demand. Fast forwarding 12 years later, that development didn't materialize to, I think, what was anticipated, and plans for the park did not materialize as well. So we've been using, for the last 12 years, the property's been leased to a local farmer, which is really not the intent of program open space as far as the program itself. So our proposed plan and why we're here today is to propose moving the program open space restriction from the West Metro Core property and move that restriction over to Conley Mill. So a portion of the Conley Mill property then would have that restriction to be used for program open space and development. We feel like this is a much more beneficial opportunity for the residents and citizens of the county. This process started over a year ago. A conversion process is not an easy process, so it started over a year ago. It's been through all the state agencies and now has been approved and signed off by the 3 secretaries of the state. So what we're here to do is to seek council approval for this conversion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or any concerns.
You have any questions for Mr. Miller? Mr. Holloway?
I'll start, not necessarily with questions, just for a little follow-up in history on this. It was back in 2008 when they started investigating buying property for a park on the west side. There was a lot of people that were in favor of having this park, and now it's never materialized. I don't know why. And I suppose we'll have a public hearing on this. Is that correct, Laura, before anything's done?
Well, I think that a resolution would need to come before council to approve the conversion. And then if they want to surplus the property or dispose of the property in some manner, then at that point you would want to have a public hearing.
So we would not have a public hearing to do the conversion?
I'm not aware of a legal requirement for a public hearing to do that.
You know, there may not be, the appetite over there now that there was then, but at that time, there was a lot of folks that wanted a park. And we know that area is still growing. It's not growing as fast as it was. And I understand your purpose, and, it says here in the correspondence that you sent us that you want to sell that property at some point in time as surplus property. But I think the people of the west side needs to have a voice in what happens, because they certainly had a voice when it was purchased. And so I think that's where we need to head with this before we do anything else.
Yeah, I think Mr. Holloway brings up some good points there. Do you have any more comments or questions? Ms. Ackley?
I remember when this property was purchased and when that was happening, and everyone in our development had signed petitions to do it and develop the park. And so I guess that was my question, is what happened? Because it's still, there's really not much out there as far as sports complex or ball fields or anything like that for Mardella, West Side. So what happened to that?
Yeah, again, this started before my time, but my understanding is that the thought process is that developments would move out at a faster rate than what they have. I can tell you I've been in the position since 2015, and I've not heard those concerns from the residents on that part of the county. We did have a public meeting when this process started before it went to the state. We did have a public meeting that we advertised, and there was no opposition presented at that public meeting. I'm not opposed to further public discussion on the topic, but I've not been made aware from anybody or heard a public demand to develop this. It's, like I said, been farmed for the last 12 years, and if there's an appetite, you have to look at, paying for something like that as well, and how do you go about doing that? But there has been a public process, certainly open to continuing that, but that's where we are.
Well, when that property was purchased, someone was trying to sell a piece of property just down the road, and we found this property for about half the price that what the other piece of property was, and it was considered a great deal. In fact, I took Rick out there and introduced him to the landowner, and they made the deal. And I think, John, you were on the council then, maybe Bill was, and
I was still on it.
yeah, and so we got that property at I guess, by today's standard, we got it at a really good deal. At that time, we thought we got a good deal. So by today's standard, so do we want to do this and give it up? Building is going to increase. There's going to be more people in the future. I know we're leasing it. That's not what it was intended for. But so I think the public ought to have a greater input into it. So,
And if I
so
could,
you had a meeting. When did you? How was this meeting held? And who was it held with?
It was at the Civic Center. It was announced publicly. It was open to the public. This is
for just this purpose, or
yes.
I wonder if the public really found out about the meeting.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was posted on the usual channels as far as posting meetings, but I will say on as far as the property itself and the future of the property, I think that that is probably a future discussion in terms of do you surplus it or not. I think we would consult with the county executive whenever that time comes that the executive would propose surplus properties if there's others out there. This may or may not be included in that list. I know I did note that in there as a possibility. But moving the conversion does not commit you to keeping or selling the property. The county could still hold on to it. The conversion would move the POS restriction from one to the other. And that's really what we're here to do now. I think the other would be something for a future discussion.
But wouldn't this impede anything that would happen on that property in the future as far as funding, being it was bought under open space money?
No, if it's county-owned, you could still apply for development funds to develop it. So if the county owns it, you could still do what you want with it. So it doesn't restrict that in any way. What it would do is put the restriction that exists now, it would put that over at the Conley Mill property where we would be committing to say, hey, this is going to be for public recreation and access, which I think that property itself, I don't need to get into all that, but I think that is a huge opportunity for us where it's located, its natural features. I think that's where the commitment would be at this point.
Is there any funds that transfer with this?
Yeah, so we have over the last 12 years, so we did a similar thing with Pirates Wharf. So we've collected the farm leases for the last 12 years. It's approximately $300,000 that we have in our fund balance. That is the farm lease money from the last 12 years. So we have that money in hand that we could use to develop that. If we decide to surplus it, we could move that money over to develop Conley Mill or leverage it for grants. Or you could use it to develop West Metro if you wanted to, but we've got about $300,000 currently from those farm leases.
There's no additional money from program open space going to Conley Mill because we transfer this property?
At this moment, no, but we can apply for it. Every year we get an allocation from the state with open space. But the challenge there is, we have a 5-year outlook for program open space, and that's a lifeline for us to be able to do capital projects. It's a finite amount of money, and the needs, we've programmed it out for the next 5 years, and it's a challenge, and we try to share that with municipalities, and we have a process that we go through, which I think is a good process, but the needs are always greater than the funds, so there is, to answer your question, there is an opportunity to apply for more, but that would kick another project down the road further, so it's...
In fact, I was going to comment, Steve, you have your 5-year master plan. The West Metro Core one is not, if my memory serves me right, we don't have anything in the master plan for any development of the one on 11 DeShiel Road.
That's correct. At this time, we don't have any plans there.
Right.
So was it a master plan previously? I'm assuming if they...
A long time ago, yes. I think it was in our, I think it was the 2005 or 2007 land. There's a LPPRP, which is a 5-year recreation and parks plan. It was not in the last 2 versions, to my knowledge, as far as developing it. We don't have specific plans at this time.
Steve, question.
Yes, sir.
On the West Metro Corp, what percentage of that funding was Project Open Space?
I believe all of it. I believe it was about $1 million purchase, and I believe it was all program open space.
And it was all open space.
That's my understanding.
So you're saying then that, and I'm assuming that in this map that you have, is it the yellow area, the section that's going to become open space
Yes.
property?
Yes, at Conley Mills. So the yellow would be the now if this is approved, that would be the restricted open space. We excluded the 2 borrow pits that Public Works is digging now. I think that could become part of a future park if that's what we did. But we excluded that from the restriction to allow them the freedom to use that as they're using it.
And I'm assuming the state has said in your meetings that it is the equivalent of the West Metro property.
Yes. So to qualify for a conversion, there's 3 qualifications. It has to be equal or greater acreage, equal or greater appraisal value, and then equal or greater recreational value. And so the state signed off that this qualifies on all 3.
Well, it's great to have this as an option. Now, the only reason the county really took this property on is because we really seriously were convinced that the value of this property was for the borough pits, for the landfill. And it looks like we're taking, about 85% of that away. So how are we going to follow through with that commitment and those savings for the landfill?
Yeah, so that, if you look at the map, that doesn't touch those pits. So those would be unaffected. So
Not the current pits, but I was under the impression that whole property was being looked at as a land use for soil.
That's what I thought.
And if you're telling us that this section that you've cordoned off, it will be sufficient for the next 10 or 20 years, then that's, I think, what was our initial goal was. But I was under the impression that the entire property needed to be used to accomplish that goal.
yeah, I'm probably not the person to answer that question.
Yeah, right.
That'd be Public Works, but
Well, when we were trying to be convinced to acquire it, that's the excuse was given for acquiring it. Is,
Oh, yeah.
100 years from now, they said, we could be digging dirt there.
And Weston came up with some very good.
Change this afternoon.
Pardon me?
I think we'll hear something different.
Yeah, I know they got something else on the agenda back
Right.
too, but, so.
Weston came up with some very good charts in reference to that. Very good data as far as what the cost in the long run would be as a benefit. But I respect what you're trying to do here, Steve. And at the time, they did not feel that this property could be assimilated to the current Henry Parker complex. I don't remember why. I don't know whether there's a ditch. I don't know if there's a problem with the roads, the woods or anything. I just really don't know. But you're saying that you think it can easily be connected and beneficial?
it would be a challenge to physically connect it. I think that would be the ideal. There is a ravine, so there is a drop-off in elevation, so you would have to bridge that if you're going to physically connect them. In a worst-case scenario, if you could not do that in a safe or affordable way, it's around the block. So you could, the proximity is there. I think ideally you would allow that connectivity, I think would be the best-case scenario.
At least you've set this up so that we now know that we have an option, which is fantastic. I still think that it would be great, though, to go back to Public Works and say, hey, what's your take on this? What's the best benefit to the county? Is it the best benefit as a Public Works with a borough pit or for our recreation parks? But at least you're getting it there so that we have a choice.
All right. Any more questions or comments?
Sure.
Mr. Hastings.
There's also at the General Assembly, I know we just came out of a session where it looks like there's going to be I don't really know where I'm still trying to figure that out, but there's an extra $85 million that's going to go to local parks. And I don't know how we take advantage of that. I know you know Sue Simmons very well and others here. So we're still trying to figure that out. But as much as possible, let's be ready to take advantage of that for what could be helpful for our parks. And so I'll just say that.
Thank you.
All right. Any more questions or comments? All right. It's not going to be a vote because it's a work session, so we can discuss this at a later date.
I think sooner. I don't know if you suggested, Joe, but I think we should have Public Works in here and together with you, Steve, and just say, hey,
You
here's how
suggested Public Works, I suggested a public hearing.
I think you said they already had a public hearing.
Let's do both.
But first of all, I think to decide, if we don't do anything, we need a public
They
hearing.
both work for the same group, so you know what the saying, what they're
No,
going to say.
what I'm saying, public hearing is great, but we don't need a public hearing if we're not going to do it. So I think it'd be nice to have Public Works in here with Recreation Parks to say, what's the best benefit to the county?
So you're recommending another work session?
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah,
If Steve
I'm
thinks
okay with
that's-
that.
Might be good to get clarity on the borrow pit.
In the meantime, the district that this is in, maybe the council person that represents that district can share some insight about maybe what some of our constituents feel from over there.
Ernie's
I'm
district.
putting a burden on
This is
your,
Ernie's, right? Isn't this yours?
Can't hear you, you're muffled up.
Councilman Davis?
Which one, where he's moving it from?
Yeah.
No, that's in your district.
Okay.
Lavender Shields?
And the two at large.
I'm the shield you. I'm putting a burden on your
I was
shoulders.
gonna say,
Yeah.
I remember signing the petition to get it several years
But
ago.
don't feel bad, where they're moving it to is going to jail.
Okay, well, we'll set up another work session with Public Works and yourself.
Great.
Yep, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, now moving on to the next work session. Ms. Hurley, how do you pronounce that name? Say it again. Kumquat and Citron? Okay. Are they here? Is that you all? Lori? Can't hear you.
It's the planning and zoning representatives are going to discuss that particular case.
Okay. Ms. Carter, do you have anybody else you want to join?
Yes, Mr. Meadows, zoning administrator.
Hello, Mr. Meadows.
Good afternoon.
It is.
Good afternoon, everyone. We do thank you for this opportunity to come before you to discuss the process and also in regards to this particular project, in regards to the solar facility that is proposed for 7.20 megawatts. I have with me today Mr. Meadows, who is the zoning administrator that works directly with these particular projects. So we're here to have some type of discussion as well. And if you have any questions, we are here to receive those as well. So we just want to let you know where we have been and where we are and how we would hope to move forward.
All right, can you give us a brief summary?
Sure. Clark?
The site is at the intersection of Conley Mill Road and Foskey Lane, zoned heavy industrial. It's consisting now of 3 original parcels that have either been combined into one large or in the process of doing that as a re-subdivision process. The project is actually comprised of 2 different solar facilities under the same ownership. The Kumquat project is a 2-megawatt facility, which would be located on the southerly part of the property abutting Conley Mill. At completion, the site will, there would be no distinction between the 2 fields. The Citron site is a 7.2 megawatt facility, and the owners and applicants are moving forward in getting the required approvals for both projects.
Okay. Have any questions?
Yes, I got a question.
Yeah, Mr. Davis.
That particular project, I was contacted, I talked to the county exec about it. Allen Myers asphalt plant, they've been trying to put a building up, and they've been having problems, something about a water easement, and it had something to do with this property. So you guys have anything?
I'm not aware of anything related to that in any way.
It was kind of funny that that I was contacted by Allen Myers, and they contacted some people here. Mr. Wilbur might be familiar with. You're not familiar? They said they talked to some people up here, and they've been held up years for getting a permit because there's something about some water easement or something, some kind of ditch or something that had to be done, and it all pertained to these 2 properties with this solar system, solar project. But it was kind of funny though. As soon as they it was coming to legislation about some things that were coming down the pike, all of a sudden this thing snapped, and these people were able. They started moving on this property, and the landowners and Allen Myers is still stuck, or they can't get their permits to do their construction.
Do you know which particular, was it with the Public Works, or are you not for sure which?
It had to do with
Department?
zoning. They were saying something about, they had to put in a settlement pump, something about the water, something about water up against the lady's property. That about where it was gonna run off in. But their thing is, when they were gonna develop them, they had to put up a settlement pond anyway to control the water. But they still was held up, I think they're still having problems.
I think that's the
What you're
meeting.
talking
Wasn't that the
about
meeting we
sounds
had?
like a Stormwater
Stormwater
management
management?
Yep.
issue, not related to planning and zoning directly.
Yeah, that's all I asked.
Yeah, but it was all tied into this property that they're putting a solar site at. Because there was a lady that owned part of the property. Her and it was family that owned the property.
Yeah, there was a stormwater issue, I think involving Allen Myers and across to another lady's
Marilyn
property.
Williams, I think, is that the one that you're speaking of, Paul?
I
mean,
believe
yes.
so.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's
is
it.
this the same property, this, where this project is to go? Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. I'm not for sure. I mean, I don't think anything, that's why I was asking whether it was related to Public Works, if there was some type of discussions there. But there hasn't been anything that has been come across as it relates to zoning. But we can look back into that. But I do remember there was some discussion, now that Paul mentions it, that was in regards to, there was a meeting with Maryland about this particular property, and there was an easement, I believe, there was an,
Water easement.
Yes.
Something about
Right.
water.
yes,
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
stormwater drainage easement.
Yeah.
yes.
So you guys won't have anything to do with that. But as far as you know, this project is going forward.
The solar project is, again, distinguishing between the two separate facilities. The 2-megawatt facility would be allowed inherently in the heavy industrial zoning district. They have submitted plans to the county departments. They are pending forest conservation approval. Stormwater management is reviewing their documents for compliance with those regulations. And as to the zoning review, it does meet the standards for setbacks, landscaping, planning plans, things of that nature. So that facility is in the process of being approved locally. That is currently parcel 317, about 11 acres plus or minus of that site. It's about a 25-acre size parcel. Ultimately, it will all be re-subdivided into one large site. The 7-megawatt facility is moving forward with the Public Service Commission requirements for the issuance of a CPCN license. Initial site visit was held on March 17th. April 6th was the first public hearing, which was conducted virtually. Comments due from interested parties would be by August 5th. And at that time, a second public hearing would be scheduled. I don't believe there's a date that has been set yet for that hearing.
Did you get any comments at the first Zoom hearing?
Not locally. Those would be submitted through the Public Service Commission.
Okay.
A quick question. Yeah. This one, because the project's in a area zoned heavy industrial, which is kind of ideal because it's an industrial scale solar project. So it's permitted by right and it's consistent with our comprehensive plan. Because our comprehensive plan, in fact, it's right here in the report. I'm looking right at it in the report that we got, where it says, the vision of the comp plan is supporting industrial development in areas zoned for such use while discouraging development of industrial in areas zoned agricultural. I guess my question, this might not be where we really discuss this or not, but if this was in an agriculturally zoned district, would this process been the same or would this process be different?
For the smaller facility, that would have been by code required to go through the special exception process with the Board of Appeals. Any facility exceeding 2 megawatts of output is a Public Service Commission process with due consideration to local.
Right, and we've had those discussions before.
We've had it several times. Is there any council thought on amending the county charter to consider anything above 2 mega?
Be a charter, be our zoning.
Mr. John.
I mean, I still think in the future, yeah, we need to discuss that, but I'll let Josh speak.
Mr. Hastings?
I guess to the larger question, this is great that project is industrial. It's an area that folks aren't going to complain. It fits our comprehensive plan. That's fantastic. 7 years ago, when I worked with another organization, I worked on the comprehensive plans up and down the Eastern Shore. Kent County they did an amazing job in essentially citing their renewable energy where they wanted things to go. After that, they had a wind project that was put together that became a solar project. At that point in time, we then worked with MACO, and of course, solar siting became one of the biggest issues with the counties. So from there, Kent County has gone through the process. Queen Anne's County has gone through a process of putting together really looking at their zoning and where a particular project could go. So from that point, Dorchester, Caroline, Queen Anne's, last year was Somerset County. You could go up and down the Eastern Shore except for Wicomico County.
Right.
And we are currently in a process now we have I don't need to mention the DAF tank and the folks that are upset with that. I've seen dozens and dozens of times across Delmarva where those kind of situations have happened, that in the middle of an agriculturally zoned area, you suddenly have a giant, project that folks didn't expect or want, and have a lot of consternation about it. So we know that the courts take into account local zoning and for their opinion, that was crucial for as you all know, with the Kent County situation. So I guess it keeps coming back to that. When are we, Wicomico County, going to go through the process where we go through some sort of process to be able to figure out where we can effectively and zone where these projects could go? Because it's nice that it's in an industrial now, but the day's coming. One way or another is likely going to happen in the future. And I know that it depends on if you have transmission lines and there's other issues there too. But nonetheless, it'd be really great if we were proactive and put together some sort of mapping or figure this out before the next situation comes where suddenly it's in the middle of Mardella Springs and, it takes up 50 or 70 acres. So I guess the larger point of that, do we have plans, or when are we going to go through that process where we will zone, when we will do solar siting or renewable energy siting?
I support that.
I guess when we want to decide to have a work session on that.
Yes, we're willing to work with you all with anything that you think is pertinent to this particular process. And so, we've had several types of talks. We've been in several meetings. So, we look to you as well as you look to us. But yes, we do have an actual opportunity. I know that Clark works very hand-on with this on a daily basis, so I don't know if there's something he would like to provide some insight, especially how we were talking about the actual process and what normally would happen when a project would actually come in.
The current arrangements for the large power generating stations, those exceeding 2 megawatts output, specifically to this project, the county council has been identified as an interested party, so either the council office directly or individual members will be included in any correspondence related to this project, to those situations which require, under local zoning, a special exception, normal practices regarding public notice, advising neighbors of the public hearing are followed with every project that the county has approved that's not considered accessory to a principal use, be it an ag application, Purdue's offices, those types of facilities. So as it's currently set up, there is a process which does include notification of neighbors. Nothing's going to happen without, following those requirements.
There's a,
Go ahead, Mr. Hastings.
I say there is, of course, I was looking at Somerset County's zoning, they have different floating districts. There's, of course, there's differences between the utility scale versus the community solar versus something that's going to be on-farm use or something along those lines. I don't know how to advance the process, and I think usually it's the planning folks that are really helping drive the conversation a little bit more. I mean, I know if this were a comprehensive rezoning, you'd probably hire a third-party organization to come in and to go through the process together. But above all else, it would be really great to be able to have a product where, I mean, not to say that we're not the competent 7 folks you want to go to, but we're not. We may have ideas, but we're not. We don't fully specialize in it. So I don't know how to advance that process, but. I know we've talked about this many times. We all kind of fear that next project that might come may or may not, and it's going to upset a lot of people, that are suddenly in a community, just like the DAF tank situation.
Sure. One of the things that we could continue to do in regards to the discussions, we can look at this like we did with the poultry. We could possibly look at that. We can look at the actual setbacks, screening, things of that nature. So we can be able to provide and also work with the Department of Law to possibly, be able to provide something for you to look at. So.
Yeah, that was, in line with what you were saying, Mrs. Carter, and what Josh said. I mean, the setbacks here are like negligible. It's 75 feet from the center of the road. I mean, 75 feet from the center of the road, that puts it right about here. And there's really no buffers whatsoever for the most part. In poultry, we established 3 buffers, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
The point is really, though, is it something that needs it? I mean, when somebody looks out on a solar field, are they saying, oh, well, that's I hate that? Or is it something that's just inconsequential? I personally like wind farms. Some people hate them. They think it destroys the landscape. So I guess that's something we would have to evaluate. You would have to maybe help us know or understand how many other counties in Maryland or how many other counties throughout the states feel that setbacks are necessity. The public in general feels that's necessary. The other thing I had, because I didn't have time to read all this, are there stipulations in place? So let's say solar goes terribly bad in, let's say, 15 years. They find out that isn't the most efficient use. The subsidies go away. Who would take care of this once the solar field, let's say, dries up?
There's a decommissioning plan.
There is a decommissioning plan.
Yeah, Public
was
Service
hoping so.
Commission requires a decommissioning.
Is it a plan or is it a bond? Do they have to bond money or is it just a plan? Because if they go out of business and they're broke and the LLC's done, you don't have anybody to go back on.
They have to bond it, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's bond. I think the developer bonds it, but I don't know, Clark, you might know that better than I do.
Mr. Wilbur.
I would defer to Mr. Wilbur.
Mr. Wilbur.
Generally, as a condition of any license, if it's going through the Public Service Commission, there's a decommissioning clause, ever evolving.
And
legal
should-
requirements. Locally, we have included as a condition of approval for any special exception for the smaller facilities, a decommissioning clause as authored by Mr. Wilbur's office. So I would, again, defer to him to tell you how effective that would be in the future. We all understand any legal language, in the future.
Mr. Wilbur?
Challenge, but
It should have a bonding requirement in it, because, as Joe says, you don't know who's going to be still financially viable way down the road to remove one of these.
And is that required by standard with the Public Service Commission?
I can't, I think it should be, but I'd have to look it up to tell you for sure.
There's definitely a decommissioning plan that has to be submitted for the, if they're 2 megawatts or over. The smaller ones, I think you mentioned they have to have something too, I think, or?
We do include a decommissioning requirement in the conditions of approval, yes.
So with Joe's comment on bonding, et cetera, first of all, it's a real guessing game as to how much control the county has over any of this. But what about this? What guarantees the decommissioning plan? What guarantees that there may be proper bonding in place? Mr. Wilbur, I guess I'd have to defer to you.
Certainly, when they build it, they can establish the bond.
By whose authority? Who would?
The county would require it.
So the county.
For the smaller field projects.
Okay, so I guess in your statement that we would be requiring that, is the bonding included as part of that decommissioning in case they can't afford to do it, they go bankrupt or something to that effect?
Yeah, well, that's why a bond is posted.
That is the language of the
It's an upfront cost at the time it's built.
If it's in here, I apologize. I may have drifted over it, but.
Well, or maybe just for timing purposes to kind of sum this up, because I know we've talked about this before in the larger sense as far as getting this into our zoning code, and we've all had the work session. We've had work sessions, and I know Laura, we had sort of looked at. Well, we've had Mr. Showalter here to talk to us. We also, I know we had looked mostly at for no particular reason, but Talbot counties. We sort of looked at theirs, and Josh was talking about Somerset's. I mean, all the counties have it. I mean, we got something we can certainly look at. And Lori, I know you just mentioned that you all can take a look at that, which I think the last time we did meet, I think weren't we going to get comments back? I think you were going to give us comments anyhow, I believe. Isn't that correct? I'm just trying to think the timing of this because we've had this on our plate.
Discussions, yes.
Yeah, so I think sounds like we need to continue that discussion, because I'm hearing it sort of from almost all the council members. There's an interest for us to continue that discussion. And at the end of the day, we're really just talking about basic, just like with poultry, we're just talking about basic buffer screens, and just like John said, setbacks, they're pretty minimal as they stand. And just those basic zoning parameters that go around any use of this magnitude.
We're way past schedule, and we're going to have to wrap this up. Mr. Hastings, did you have another comment?
Just the last thing to say is that when I worked with the Mills Branch project with their energy, there was a wind energy and then a solar energy project. The PPRP in DNR, they put together a map, as you all both know, but it's a great piece that basically shows, hey, here's the county, here's the area where the project would go, and they just layer the hell out of it with all sorts of resource conservation, the things that we would normally look at, but then they also look at flight patterns of bird, you name it. That whole process, and this is, of course, that's industrial scale, but nonetheless, I've seen these maps in multiple counties where we could use it as a base to figure out, okay, well, here's just the few areas where we could allow that. And if we got to that process, then we could do like, Caroline County, they set a max of 2,000 acres because they were worried about losing farmland. So we don't have to go through that way. We can do it our own way, but I would love to be able to have us go through a comprehensive process and just so that we don't get caught off guard one day. But otherwise, for this particular project, I like that it is in industrial scale. It makes sense, and I appreciate you bringing it forward. It's positive.
Thank you. And we'll be in touch with you for further discussion on what everybody has brought up. We're about 35, 40 minutes past schedule. And we do have to break for lunch and then get back to the closed work session. How do you all feel about postponing number 5 to either after lunch or to the next meeting?
Either's fine with me.
Is it okay to postpone it? You guys good with that? All right. At this time, we're going to break for lunch and then come back for a closed work session in 25 minutes. So,